All right, you guys, so today we're talking about finding the area of circles. If you want to turn in your book, it's lesson 26.4 on page 492. It's really quite simple if you're learning how to use formulas. So let's look at the steps for formulas. Hopefully you have these either memorized or written in your notes. If you don't have them written in your notes, then pause the recording, write these down. But the steps are, number 1, write the formula down. Number 2, plug in the known information. And number 3, solve the equation. As long as you follow those steps, you should be fine and be able to solve almost any problem that uses a formula. So let's write the formula for finding the area of a circle down. The formula is A equals pi r squared, which means area equals pi times the radius, r stands for radius, squared. We have to remember that pi equals 3.14. So pause the recording. Write this down, circle it, underline it. I don't want you to use this in solving. I want this to be a separate formula that you have just kind of written down. We'll rewrite the formula as we solve problems, but make this nice and bold so that you can look at it and memorize it. So pause the recording, write that down. Okay, well let's go over one more really important vocabulary. If you don't understand this, it's going to be really hard to solve for the area of a circle, but notice on this particular diagram, the line that goes all the way across is called the diameter, okay? And the shorter line, the line that goes from the center to the outside, is called the radius. One way to think about this is diameter is a longer word, and it's a longer line. So pause the recording, write this down. I want you to draw this diagram and write these two words down. Diameter, write down the fact that it goes all the way across the circle. Radius goes from the center to the outside and is equal to half the diameter. Sorry, there's that watermark in there that's making it hard to see. But the radius goes from the center of the circle to the outside, and it is always equal to half the diameter. Pause the recording and write this down. Okay, now if we're saying that the diameter, let's say that on this particular problem, that the diameter is 10, okay? Now, if we're saying that the diameter is 10, when we look at our notes, the radius goes from the center to the outside and is equal to half the diameter. That means that the radius is going to be 5, right? Because it's half of the diameter. No matter what the diameter is, you just split it in half, and that's going to give you the radius. So if it gives you a decimal or a fraction, just divide by 2, and you're going to find the radius. And that's important because if we look at our formula, we need to know the radius in order to solve, okay? All right, now that being said, this is a picture of a wrestling mat, and we're going to find the area of the circle in this wrestling mat, the boundary line. So to do that, we need to know the radius, and it doesn't, in this particular problem, give us the radius. It gives us the diameter. What is the diameter? We see it right there, 28 feet, so I'm going to write that under diameter, 28 feet. And since radius is always half of the diameter, we know that the radius is then 14 feet. Okay? So now that we know the radius, we can solve for this problem. So the steps are, I write the formula down. A equals pi r squared. Got to draw my line. Second step is plugging in information. So A equals 3.14. times, now we know the radius is not 28, that's the diameter because it goes all the way across, it's a longer line. Radius is 14 feet squared. Okay? All right, now we've plugged in the information, now we just need to solve. And I'm not going to spend the time multiplying because I think you guys can do that on your own, but you'd go off to the side and you'd figure out what 14 squared is. And when you multiply 14 by 14, you're going to get the number 196. When you multiply 14 with 14, you're going to get 196. So now we have 3.14 times 196. Then you go off to the side, you do that little multiplication problem, and you're going to get an answer of 615.44 feet squared. Now in your homework, it actually asks you to round to the nearest whole number. So when you're rounding to the nearest whole number, you look at whatever's in the tenths place right there, and you round that whichever way you're supposed to. So a 4 we would round down, so the answer is actually going to be 615 feet squared. Okay, let's look at another problem. This is a CD. Some of you know what a CD is. Some of you only know what iPods are and don't even recognize this. But a CD is something you put music on and you can put in your CD player and actually listen to music. But we're going to find the area of an actual CD. In reality, the radius of a CD is 2.4 inches about. So we're going to use that information to solve and find the area. First step is write down the formula. A equals pi r squared. Draw my line. Then we plug in the information. A equals, what does pi equal? 3.14. What is the radius? The radius is 2.4. Notice that it's the radius and not the diameter, right? It doesn't go all the way across. It's only half. So that is the radius. It's the smaller line. So 2.4 squared. Now, when you square 2.4, you're going to get 5.76. So if you came off to the side and you multiplied 2.4 times 2.4, you would get 5.76. Okay, then we multiply 3.14 times 5.76. Then when you go off to the side on that one and multiply 3.14 times 5.76, you would get that the answer is 18.09, which we would just round down to area equaling 18 inches squared. Okay, really simple. Again, I'm skipping the steps where you're going off and doing work just to make this video a little bit faster, but you would just step off to the side, excuse me, do some multiplication. All right? Now, let's go over this one more time. Make sure you remember the steps, write down the formula, plug in the known information, and solve the equation. Make sure that you have this equation written down because we're about to try some problems on our own. All right, now let's try a couple problems. I'd like you to pause the recording, write these down, and solve. Make sure you're paying attention to whether or not the problem is giving you the diameter or the radius, because the formula asks for the radius. You have to know the radius. So if it gives you the diameter, split that in half, then you've got your radius. If you've got your radius, just go for it. All right, pause the recording, solve these problems. All right, so take a look at the answers to these problems. Notice that the first one is A equals 28 meters, and the second one is A equals 95 meters. I rounded those. Now, the keys are, we found that the diameter, it's obviously giving us a line that goes all the way across. So the diameter is 6, which means the radius is going to be 3 on this first one. The second one gives us the radius because it only gives us the distance from the center to the outside. So that's already the radius. That's the number we need. Now on the first one, I wrote down the formula, plugged in the known information. I know that 3 squared is 9. I went off to the side. I multiplied 3.14 times 9. I got 28.26. I rounded to the nearest whole number, so the answer is 28 meters squared. On the second one, same thing. Wrote down the formula. A equals pi r squared. Plugged in 3.14 for pi, 5.5 for the radius. After I squared 5.5 by multiplying it by itself, I got 30.25. Then multiplying that by 3.14, I got 94.99 meters squared, which I rounded to 95 meters squared. So the area of that second larger circle is 95 meters squared. So make sure that you're following the steps for the formula. Make sure that you are using the correct formula, and I think you guys should do great. Thanks.